Now, COVID-19 has highlighted the weaknesses of globalization and the importance of transforming our system to a more resilient economy. For the first time, we see an alignment between ecology and economy to answer the climate emergency. Frederick Govinsili, Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Tikehau Investment Management, will moderate a panel to discuss this matter. He will be joined by Jean-Marc Gales, T2 Advisory Board Member, Chairman of Woodham Mortimer, Crowley Carbon's Chief Executive Officer Norman Crowley, French climate scientist and research director at the French Alternative Energies and Atomic Energy Commission, Valerie Masson-Delmotte, and Pierre Abadie, Executive Director and co-head of Tikehau Energy Transition Practice. We head over now to Frederick.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us this morning. Maybe just as an introduction, I think it's fair to say that the COVID-19 pandemic has created the biggest global crisis in a generation, sending shockwaves through health, economies and societies around the world, and the sheer scale of this crisis has also generated collective awareness of the systematic flaws in our economic system. Looking forward, the energy transition has an important role in accelerating the recovery, and a pandemic-resilient world would require a more local, circular, more energy-efficient economy. By the way, these developments are also critical to lower greenhouse emissions and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees in the long run. And the post-COVID economic recovery is perhaps the trigger of a transition towards the low-carbon economy. And it will be the main topic of this panel. Valerie, we say that there is a climate emergency and we need to act now, and there is a sense of urgency. Can you please set up the scene for us?
Yes, thank you very much. And hello, everyone. So there are a couple of key messages from the state of scientific knowledge as assessed in the recent reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Of course, the starting point is that human activities have caused around 1 degree of global warming with accelerating sea level rise. And regional climate trends everywhere and intensified extreme events such as heat waves, intense rainfall events, droughts, or fire weather already affect ecosystems, human health and well-being, livelihoods, water and food security. And climate change more broadly is affecting systems we depend on, from the top of the mountains to polar regions or the depths of the ocean. And in addition to the expansion of a warmer sea, the loss of land ice, glaciers, ice sheets is driving this acceleration of the rate of sea level rise and an increase in coastal hazards. The information from climate science is really clear. Future climate-related risks increase with each additional fraction of warming, and they depend on choices and implementation of risk management, adaptation and mitigation options. So that's the first part of the picture. Every additional fraction of warming matters. The second part of the picture is related to greenhouse gas emissions. And we see now that global CO2 emissions are stagnating globally after sharp increases in the last decades. The pandemic has led to a temporary decline of around 5% this year only, due to a slowdown mostly of transport and industry, but also with already a rebound effect in some countries like China. Emissions of other powerful greenhouse gases, methane and nitrous oxide, are steadily increasing. What we need to understand is that if global CO2 emissions are reduced year after year to net zero, and other emissions and pressure on land are limited, then global warming can stabilize within a few decades. However, sea level will continue to rise during centuries, but at a slower rate, giving more time to adapt. To limit global warming to below 2 degrees, the agreed target of the International Paris Agreement, then CO2 emissions need to decline by around a quarter by 2030 compared to 2010. And this decline needs to reach 45% by 2030 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And avoiding overshoot, and associated risks. Reliance on future large-scale carbon dioxide removal can only be achieved if CO2 emissions start to decline in the coming years, well before 2030, earlier than implied by the nationally determined contributions, so the pledges from governments stated in 2015. And this requires system transitions in all sectors: industry, urbanization, land use, and the food system. But a key transition is linked to the energy system. And of course, every year matters. And the last message is that ambitious mitigation and effective adaptation can bring lots of co-benefits in terms of employment, but also ecological and economic benefits, including for public health and more resilient livelihoods for those who are vulnerable. So near-term action can avoid increasingly negative, severe, and potentially irreversible impacts with escalating costs. A final word about using scientific information. Climate services and climate stress tests, they are also key to include scientific knowledge in strategic planning to enhance resilience of economic activities and investments. So maybe the most important message is that there's an urgency to act, obviously. But climate action and sustainability can really go hand in hand if well designed and well implemented. And therefore, every choices matter. And your choices, the choices of members of the panel here, matter.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Maybe just to elaborate, thank you very much for setting up the scene and providing this climate picture. To you guys, I mean, what are the main transformations or the main sector you feel we need to invest in order to go in a low carbon economy in a swift way, an efficient way as well?
Yeah, I'll take that, Frederic. So we look at the global warming as being, there are many factors causing global warming, but you have to look at the 80-20 rule. What are the things that are causing this, and what are the top things? And it can be summarized as energy, transport, food, right? So, and they are obvious, right? Energy generated by fossil fuels is not good. Transport consuming those fossil fuels is not good. And then obviously the food sector, the rise of the demand for meat as a protein worldwide is a huge contributor. So when we look at those from a action and from an investment point of view, we look at each one. And so if you look at energy, the obvious solution in energy is renewables. And we're very fortunate that in the last 10 years, there's been a dramatic reduction in the cost of renewables. If you take solar, for example, there's been a drop. If you take 2010, a kilowatt of solar was costing you about $8,500 to generate, whereas a kilowatt of solar today is costing just over $100 to generate. So it's a phenomenal reduction in cost of generation. And now we can see globally across the next 10 years that if we mix wind, solar, and battery storage, we can see that to generate a kilowatt of energy is going to cost as little as 3 cents by the end of that time. So it's there is still a massive challenge in coordinating the generation of that, in managing the impact of that on the grid. But we're very clear about that roadmap and how to help get there. Crowley Carbon, our business, its role is not just to help large corporations generate that renewable energy themselves, but also to stop wasting the $3 trillion a year that factories and commercial businesses waste of that energy. So that in itself, massive commercial opportunity, massive investment opportunity. The next one is transport, and clearly everybody has watched this year with amazement as the electrification of transport has just become a bigger and bigger thing. So while fossil fuel-based transport has suffered and the valuations have really suffered with fossil fuel-based transport, the electrification side with the rise of Tesla, with the rise of NIO, has been incredible, right? And so we can really see that actually, despite the massive drop in the demand for fossil fuel-based transport, there's been a massive increase in the electrification of transport. And Jean-Marc will talk about that and about that radical shift. And then finally is the food sector. And again, their technology is starting to play a massive part. So if you look in the last couple of years, over $23 billion has been invested in both plant-based food and the rise of plant-based food, but now also in the rise of cell ag or cellular agriculture, the ability to create meat-based protein in a bioreactor. And what's been dramatic in the last year is that in excess of $1 billion has been invested in the last year in cell ag. So more money has been invested in the last 12 months in that sector than has been invested in the entire history of that sector. And that cell ag, and you get a lot of people going, well, I don't want a burger that was grown in a test tube. But in actual fact, in another 5 years, you won't know whether a burger was created from an actual animal or whether it was created in a lab. And that whether we like that or not, that wave is coming at us at a phenomenal speed. And again, the price drops are incredible. So if you wanted a cell-based burger, the first one was invented in 2012 and it cost $1 million. And now we're able to access this exact same burger for a couple of dollars. And so like all the other aspects of technology, the cost of this is dropping dramatically, and the effect that'll have in the next 5 years on our entire food sector is amazing. So it's all change across the sector, driven by technology and then driven by the investment in those various technologies.
Thank you, Norman. I mean, if the technology is there to resolve the global issue we discussed across energy, transport, and food, what else do we need to do?
Yeah, I will answer to this as a starting point. Thank you, Fred. So we are really, in a I would say massification process right now and an acceleration process. As Norman just explained, ultimately, and if you come back to what Valerie was saying as well, if we want to keep everything, and when I say keep everything, is not our house or our money, it's more our well-being. We have to remind ourselves that in fact we are currently living in the best well-being ever. So when I say keeping everything, this is our well-being globally. In fact, we need to change everything. And we need to change everything systemically. It's the system that needs to change. And ultimately, more than the technology, usually we've got always this belief that, let's find a new stuff that will all save us. Ultimately, we are on a train that is running full speed. And this train is emitting a lot of CO2, is generating a lot of externalities on biodiversity and climate. And what we need to steer there is to open the bonnet of this train, of this very fast car, and see how we can change everything to keep the well-being that we have while, preserving the world where we're living. And that's the main challenge. What is interesting here, and that's why science is very important, is that science is just science. So ultimately, you cannot be against it. They are just giving the data that allows us to make our decision. And that's the way that we need to steer our system. We need to accept the fact that, yes, we are facing collectively a huge problem of climate and biodiversity, but the path is also known. And in fact, Norman already alluded what is the path. And now we've got the tech, we need to massify it. So what is key here is how to route mostly, in fact, the global savings, because ultimately, we've got currently roughly $80,000 of global savings, which is roughly the same as the world GDP. So as firepower inside the global saving, you've got the same as the global wealth generated on Earth in 1 year. When you look at the amount of money that is required just to make the energy transition, ultimately, when you look at the number of the International Energy Agency, I don't know if they're fully correct. No one can say that everything is fully correct, but that gives us an order of magnitude. We are speaking that in between the base case scenario that is just there to fulfill the world with energy, and that leads to 3 to 4 degrees global warming, which is basically the end of humanity, and the sustainable development scenario, there is an incremental investment that is only 250 billion per year. Over the next 10 years that are critical for the climate emergency, it's 2,500 billion. You are speaking about 2% of global saving reallocation to be able to sort out, the problem of climate. So clearly what we need to have right now is to have people that start to open the book of what the scientists are telling us. When you root this money, you need to root it not in a nice story or a trendy story, but in something that has got an immediate effect. And since this has got an immediate effect, this has got a lot of value because ultimately it preserves the world that we want to preserve. So that's our main challenge. And I would say that the biggest, effect that we can have today, and it's one that Norman is also working on, is the energy efficiency. Our world, we should not forget, is still working with 80% of fossil fuels. Each time that we are more efficient at constant GDP or constant production, that means that we are lowering the CO2 per wells produced, if you want. And this is the key of what we need to do over the next 10 years. And when we look at the system itself, the system from fossil fuels to the end user, structurally, and just, again, science is physics. You are going through turbine, you are losing 60 to 70% of the energy extracted. So we are wasting through the transformation of fossil towards electricity, 60% of the energy that we extract. But then when we open the box of the end user, in the industry, in the buildings, etc., we are also identifying that we are wasting between 20 to 50% of it, which means that globally we are more or less wasting 80% of the energy that we extract. And if we do the job properly, if we take this science-based engineering route, we can largely improve this system. And if you reduce by half the amount of energy you spent at constant GDP, you reduce by 4 the CO2 emission. And the Paris Agreement is dividing it by 5. So here we've got a route. In fact, the message is very positive to me, is that we are doing something very silly that is wasting 80% of the fossil that we extract. And in fact, it's just required 2% of global saving reallocation to sort out this problem. So we just need the right strategies and the right people to open the box and do the job properly. It's requiring a lot of sweat, but I think that we need to sweat if we want to do it.
Thank you, Pierre. So there is technology, there is money. You guys alluded to energy. Maybe we can also discuss about the mobility and how it transforms the sector. And Jean-Marc, what does it take to shift to low carbon mobility, and what does it mean for your industry?
Well, thanks a lot, Frederick, thanks a lot for being on this panel and talk about decarbonized mobility. I'm going to focus on mobility in terms of mostly individual mobility on cars, because it's the most important factor and the one with the highest leverage at the moment that we can attack. And we see at the moment a great constellation. We see a bit of the major factors aligning here, which we haven't seen in the last years. And the major factors, and allow me to dwell on each of them for a minute. The major factors are the regulatory factors. They are pure demand drivers. We're talking importantly about technology, and we talk about society. Yeah. So on the regulation, we have seen that most countries, and there's almost a race between governments to ban combustion vehicles out of the roads of their respective countries. We have latest seen the UK saying that by 2030, from 2030 onwards, no combustion engine will any longer be allowed on the roads. Yeah, Oxford has banned diesel cars since 2020. Yeah, and we're seeing those coming up, and most manufacturers in those countries, they don't yet have a solution for that, but the solution will come as soon as we go more to the technology, because as Pierre already alluded to, we have the technology in hand already. The European Commission has been extremely serious about a couple of years ago, on the 90 gram limit in Europe, and I was probably one of the fathers of that regulation. So it takes a few years to get it where it is, and we get another 37.5% below those 90 grams, depending on where each manufacturer is this year in 2025. And you see a massive also trade with credits already on that. And part of the profits of Tesla, for instance, is explained by this. So the regulatory framework is coming, but regulation is never sufficient to push a technology over the line. Yeah. The second one are demand drivers. Yeah, and demand is people adopt something when the cost is sensible. And we've seen battery prices drop a lot. We've seen announcements that probably next year, the year after, the average cost of a battery cell, of a kilowatt hour of battery cells is going to be below $100. That makes for an average pack of 40 to 50 kilowatt hours, you're getting to $4,000, $5,000 a year. And we're getting close to the cost of a combustion engine. So cost-wise, in terms of a pure bill of material one, electrical propulsion, and it's not only the battery, but the electrical engine doesn't cost far less than a normal combustion engine, and especially the efforts that we need to make a combustion engine afterwards clean costs a huge amount. Yes, so if you could go exhaust wise, you can spend up to $2,000, $3,000 just what comes out of the engine to make it a bit better, and it isn't, because the CO2 is not affected by that. Yeah, so we're seeing competitive. We're seeing also kilowatt hours in terms of grids. Yeah, here in the UK, I mean, 100 miles for an electrical car costs about pure cost from electricity in the grid that we have here about £4, and that makes fleet adopt electrical vehicles as well, because it's them who are driving the most, and that push comes from large cities, last miles. Yeah, so you not only have individual transport where it becomes attractive, but you also have fleets, and especially we see the Amazon effect during the COVID crisis, where then delivery of parcels via electrical and maybe even via autonomous in 10-15 years is becoming extremely interesting. Yeah, we have seen governments a massive rush as well to invest into charging infrastructure. If we don't talk about cities, if we move more towards districts outside of the larger agglomerations, Germany has targets 1 million by 2025. The whole of and Germany is one of the front runners together with the Netherlands and some Nordic countries. In the whole of Europe, we want to have 6 million by 27, 28 of charging stations. It is an investment, but there are billions of money currently also by the European Commission that they put aside for this one. I think the most important is probably the technology as well. I mean, the technology, and Pierre has alluded to it, the technology is there. We need to make it more efficient, and efficiency is the massive driver. And let's have a look at battery materials. We talk about solid state here, but there we talk 5 years in the future. The current ones we have here, making them more efficient, working on cathode materials. There's loads of research done on this, and there's loads of research as well on battery management systems, which is one of the fundamental issues for the future. Because if you're running, like example of an electric car maker, 2060 battery cells, you need to know exactly which ones are overheating, what is the remaining useful life. Yeah, and there's loads of research in the US, in top universities and in companies going on those. We do have silicon carbide is making progress on switches to make inverters from direct current to alternative current to make them faster as well. And we are multiplying at the moment. An electrical engine probably has an efficiency of 80%, but we might go to the target of the whole industry to get closer to 90% by working on the technology. And there's also one of the alignments that we see. There is massive research going on worldwide on those. Another one, as a result, we see the most valuable car maker at the moment is an electrical car maker. The car stock that has grown fastest in the last years is another electrical Chinese car maker. That's NIO. The most valuable company in our business is Tesla. You see that what we see with technology drivers, with regulatory one, with demand drivers, with society drivers as well. Because people also start getting fed up sitting in combustion-powered cars here. We have cars that weigh 2 tons. Yeah, we use them 5% of our time. They carry on average 1.2 people. It takes about just the production of them burns the same as burning fuel during 50,000 miles. Yeah, and that perception, especially among young people, is driving as well the adoption of different methods of transport. Yeah, we see the whole pattern in those of a disruption, and those disruptions normally last not more than 10 years. Yeah, and it's starting right now. I believe that if we look at the forecasts, which most investment banks tell you that in 2030 we're going to see 30% of battery electric vehicles, or 35%, moving up from 20 about 6 months ago. Goldman or Morgan Stanley, I think that they are still very pessimistic. I believe that, as you normally see in a disruption, you first have slow adoption here. Then when the technology and societal and demand drivers, all the ducks get into one row, you have a very fast curve here. And I wouldn't be surprised to see an adoption rate and a sell rate of 90% of electrical vehicles by 2030. So we're at the beginning of that massive disruption that we're going to see also different ways of not only individual transport. After this wave, we're going to see the autonomous driving wave here, and it's completely different. But that's probably for another discussion. Completely different ways of transport in large cities.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Maybe just to elaborate, I mean, do you believe we'll see different kind of propulsion in parallel? For example, hydrogen. Do you believe we can see that happening in the transportation industry?
I mean, that's a very good question. We're seeing a rise of hybrid, but I think a hybrid in itself is a good intermediary because it satisfies the regulatory requirements. And most major car makers, most boards were very nervous when those regulations were discussed of the 90 grams. So they said, oh, that's revolutionary. What do we do to preserve our factories, to preserve the jobs? And then the idea was, well, we just keep the same cars here, and we put a second source of energy into it, like an electrical, a bit of batteries, but still a petrol or diesel engine. It's never a good idea to have two powertrains in maybe on an aircraft, but not on a vehicle on the ground. So it's an intermediate solution. It's a plug. It plugs the gap. It gave the car makers some time to fulfill the very tough regulations we see in the next years. It gave them time to do that disruption. However, the car makers that we see the most successful ones is that designed the cars from the start for this electric revolution here and didn't make a compromise by trying to adapt the combustion-powered car into an electrical car. And those are the ones we mentioned. There are a few others here. There's XPeng in China as well. And so I believe that hybrid is we are going to see hybrids coming up as well. But just to give you a couple of numbers, there are 450 new electrical cars coming out in the next 2 years, battery electric vehicles worldwide, up to 22, and there are only about 100 hybrid electrical ones. So even the car makers as well are shifting now. We have even seen the major shift of the biggest and probably the most competent hybrid car maker worldwide, which is Toyota. And Toyota now is going to electrical vehicles as well. Yeah, they still got a cost advantage, yeah, slight one. However, in the future, I believe that the future of individual transportation belongs to full electric. Hydrogen is an interesting one. Hydrogen, well, we got the typical storage problems we have with hydrogen and infrastructure issues, which are way above what we have for electrical drives. Yeah, for instance, I'm setting up a hydrogen infrastructure is far more. You talk a factor of 10 here. I mean, filling up a hydrogen tank is a different thing than filling up an electrical car, where we're getting faster and faster with higher kilowatt chargers that are and supercharger networks that are built up in worldwide. Hydrogen is a technology, we call it wire to gas to wire. It's an energy vector transition that you have. You have the electrolysis, which is only about 75% efficient. Then the compression is maybe 90, converting that to electricity probably 60. So in total, you talk about an efficiency that is way below that now for an adoption to an electrical vehicle. To give you another direct comparison, a Tesla Semi, which is the Tesla truck, is about 60 cents per mile total cost here, the Nikola one, and without any prejudice, but it's about 95, and those are the numbers that those manufacturers tell themselves here. And in trucks, we still talk about an adoption that may be useful to see. As an industry, we're currently working on fuel cell electric vehicles and for long distance trucks. Yeah, and hydrogen may have a raison d'être in those applications. In shorter distances, me and my colleagues don't see it yet. Let's have a look at it again in 20 years. But the wire to gas to wire physics, they are what they are right now, and long distance battery trucks, they will become very, if there's no breakthrough, and I believe there will be another breakthrough in battery technology in 5 years, but if there's no breakthrough, it might be a bit difficult to store all those batteries in a truck that does 1,000 miles a day. However, to be frank, I don't see hydrogen in individual mobility coming up for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Thank you very much. Look, I think Valerie really articulated the climate urgency, and Norman and Pierre have conveyed very positive message, like there is technology, there is money. So do you believe collectively the COVID will act as a catalyst, or it may postpone the transformation into low carbon and climate, and deal with the climate urgency? So what's your sense about the COVID impact, about the trajectory?
I can provide a bit of feedback and then giving then the mic to the other. But on our side, clearly since the COVID, we are currently raising fund to invest into those companies that are transformative for the rest of the world, and the pace of fundraise accelerated clearly. I mean, the year 2018 was very complex. The people could not even understand clearly what is the decarbonization of socio-economic system. So we call that just energy transition. 2019, the people start to fully acknowledge, the climate change issue, and COVID, I think, has clearly triggered something. So on the fundraise, we can see that more and more people are interested, and we see it as well in our portfolio company that their order book, and Norman is one example of them, and Jean-Marc as well, working in your group, has been a lot, I would say, dynamized by any of the post-COVID recovery plan from governments. So you see that the demand is currently pushed. You see that the people are accelerating their shift, and you see that more and more money is willing to be rooted there. What is key there is to be credible and align in interest. I think the main problem of climate that I faced myself in my day-to-day job is that usually it's the message is bared by people that are not credible to massification. And I think that now we need to institutionalize this process, accepting the science, having science-based strategies on financing, this route to the right companies that are transforming the world in the next 10 years that we have to answer to the climate emergency. And this cannot be only seen as philanthropical or nice to have. This should be the focus of any investor, the focus of any government, and we start to have an alignment towards this. But that means that it's the institution themselves that need to reorganize, accept the science, go with intention, and bear their intention with alignment of interest. And I think that's the key driver of maximizing this. And as I said, ultimately, we're speaking about 2% of global reallocation of global savings. So it's not that huge. It's totally feasible by a small number of people, but credibility is key. Accepting the science is key.
Thank you. I'm sure Valerie, Jean-Marc, and Norman, you want to react to that, because
Yes,
you've got different perspective.
Yes, I wanted just to say one thing. Given the scale of the transformations that are needed, a key condition for them to take place is that they have a fairness component, and they are perceived to be fair, and therefore public action, helping training and shifts in jobs for those from sectors that are affected and need to change, to also provide manpower to the sectors that need skilled workers will be critical. That's a key enabling condition for the changes to occur and to be supported by society.
And just from me, I fully agree on the fairness component. One of the most practical things we can do, I think, in that is just drive the cost of these solutions down, because the lower the cost of these solutions, the easier it is for developing countries to get access to them and be able to use them. And we can only influence government policy so much, but in things like cost, we can influence that heavily.
Absolutely. I mean, I would probably add, Norman, to the cost, the efficiency as well, because we see in technological revolutions and evolutions that they go hand in hand here. We are still at the beginning here. However, we talk about a 300 billion industry. If I just talk about the mobility one, on a yearly basis, yeah, over the next 10 years, and it's accelerating. Yeah. I want to pick up the ball from Pierre as well. Give you an example on Eurogroup, a company we invested as Tikehau T2 we invested into, and that company was founded 53 years ago, and they were a leading player, one of the biggest worldwide in electrical automation, doing engines, rotors and stators, which is the heart of every electrical engines. And they did pretty well. And then they discovered about 4 years ago the electrical drivetrains. Yeah, and you see any electrical drivetrain for a car, truck, whatever, needs a rotor and a stator, or at least one. Some have two, some have even 4 engines. And within 4 years, this company has become the world market leader in rotors and stators here. And it's growing by 30% a year at the moment. Yeah, and we don't see that going down here. We see that growth, and you see it's a real company. It's 2,000 people. It's about $500 million revenue right now, but we are very hopeful to double that in the next 3 to 4 years. The order books are full, and that's why this revolution we're discussing, it's in full swing. And to come back to what Norman said, the cost of those elements goes further down because we've seen that in other disruptions as well, where cost was a driving factor to make it usable to everyone, to make it adoptable by everyone as well. But just to give an example on one company, a real world company, which is at the heart of this major disruption.
Norman has been raising his hand, so Norman.
Yeah, no, I just think it's what I see out there in climate change is quite a lot of hysteria a lot of the time among people, because the scale of the challenge is just so large that people inevitably feel helpless, where we find that it works really well just to break down what the big problems are, what the technological solutions are, and then what the financial obstacles to those not happening are, and then attack them one at a time. And it helps us to just reduce our own worry and our own worry for our children and our grandchildren, to be able to look at it in bite-sized chunks and then attack each one.
Thank you. Look, we've got 5 minutes left, so maybe around the table, 1 minute each. What would be the main takeaway or key message you want to convey to the audience if they have to leave the room with one message or one challenge solution that we can provide? What would it be? Maybe Valerie, if you don't mind starting.
So I just want to share the fact that the scientific community is really working hard to provide the best available state of knowledge and communicate it clearly. I'm currently working with 230 authors from 60 countries remotely to release, hopefully this summer, next year, the state of knowledge related to climate change. And the key message from all these scientists is, please use that knowledge. Please take it into account so that you build resilience. You make sure that your investments today pass climate stress tests, and so they are not affected by trends or extreme events. And that's a key role for scientists, to make sure that we can provide information that is robust with a wide range of uncertainty. And we're working hard to be able to deliver information that is suitable for risk management, looking also at low probability but possible high impact events. And I think the message from that community is, please use information we're working hard to deliver.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Valerie. Jean-Marc, on your side, what would be the key message in a minute for us?
I mean, the one my personal state of mind is that of an optimist here. But the key message to the audience and to everyone is awareness here. We need to make people aware that the solutions are there. Even the one we have now, we don't need to wait until other technological steps here. And we need to do it. The awareness that it can be done, the awareness that we need everybody cooperating in society, in technology, and in industry as well. And forget about old solutions here. They won't be the key for the future. Let's build this new future together and go fast here.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Norman, on your side?
Yeah, it's about reiterating that, we can be optimistic about the future. The technologies are there, the momentum is picking up all the time. That's my takeaway from the whole COVID pandemic, is just that during the pandemic, people did not move away from their responsibilities on climate. Both corporations, and you can see, are moving faster and faster towards achieving their ESG goals. And then consumers, with increase in the sales of electric cars, increase in the sales of efficiency products. People, despite the pandemic and all the worry associated with that, the human race actually moved more towards, the reduction of greenhouse gases rather than away from it in that time. And that was a huge and positive surprise for us. So I think we all on this panel have faith in humanity. Yeah,
it's good to know. Definitely, we share the same belief. Pierre, a word on your side.
On my side, I would just say that time for action is now. But we need to act responsibly and credibly, which means that we need to accept the science, we need to align the system and accept it as it works today, to be able to route as much as equity or capital towards what is transforming it. The system show is absolutely keen on doing it. The paths are known. I would say that COVID has even triggered the acceleration of it. In the past, if you want to invest in sustainability, you had to be profitable. My last point would be to say that today, if you want to be sustainable, you need to invest in sustainability. So, and that's a key shift that just happened, in fact, with this COVID crisis. So I'm very optimistic about the future. I see a huge potential of investment, and ultimately, for the first time, you have to stop thinking at growing at any cost, but we need to choose where we want to grow. Grow is just a measurement of the transformation, and what we need over the next 10 years is a full transformation of the system.
I appreciate that. So thank you very much. I see we've got 30 seconds left. So I just want to grab the opportunity to thank you all, and for this positive message and the clear path forward. So I think that we need to act, and there is awareness, technology, money, science to support that. So I think the key message that let's do it now. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time. Thank you very much for the audience. And I wish you a good day.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Frédéric, and his panel. In fact, thank you to all the presenters, the moderators, and the speakers who've contributed to the discussion so far here at the Singapore FinTech Festival 2020.